Jim Leffler again. We're continuing the psychodynamic psychotherapy techniques class, and today we'll be discussing session 8. So today we'll be thinking about narrative play, metaphor, and the field. And when I bring up the narrative and metaphor, as well as kind of the introduction to something about dreaming, it's an attempt to kind of shift the way you may be thinking about or understanding what you're hearing in a session. I'll come back to that in just a second. So, as review, sessions 1 through 4 are kind of around listening. 5 and 6 we're discussing the defense of projective identification, kind of shifting towards an idea of container contained, that it could be communication. And last session was thinking about levels of interpretation and how to meet somebody at their current mental state. Thinking about a mental apparatus and how well it's functioning and how to kind of meet it there. So I'm not sure if any of y'all would be familiar with the idea of drawing or ever attempted to draw. But one technique that can be done to help people move from assuming they know how to draw something to drawing it as it is. So instead of like when you draw a house, you know it's a box and on top it's a triangle and it's got 4 rectangles for windows and doors on the front face, transitioning to drawing the lines as they are. One thing you can do is take a picture and just turn it upside down. And this kind of tricks the brain into kind of drawing what it sees instead of assuming that it knows. And so that's really what I'm kind of trying to offer today as ways to shift to a different way of perceiving so that you are seeing what's in front of you and able to kind of respond to it, not trying to put it into a symptom category or an illness script that you may be so expert at in terms of regular medical psychiatric training. The other element we're moving towards is this idea of trying to author a session and not decode it or not say, this is what it means. We've really been doing that the whole time. So you recall last session I brought forward and discussed a patient who's very flat and has lots of unrepresented experience. And we talked about how Levine and Alvarez would try to call this person into being. And today we're going to introduce another individual, Antonio Ferro, who's an Italian psychoanalyst who broadens the idea of container contain from being this interaction between 2 different subjectivities into kind of looking at the intersubjective space between them, which he would use this word field. It wasn't his idea originally, but I won't go into the theoretical lineage there. But that what's occurring, the emotional space, it may be hard to sort out. Is it mine? Is it theirs? And rather, maybe it's just a way to kind of comment on what's happening in the in-between. It's kind of a understanding of a we-ness that's developing within the psychotherapeutic brain. And it moves from transference, countertransference into the shared emotional space. And the patient's not delivering us a finished text to be decoded or deciphered, right? So there's some thought and attempt that when someone presents data, we are meant to be able to look at it and say, you're telling me this or that. But we're trying to shift from what does the material mean, tell us, to what is perhaps being authored between us right now, and how can that be expanded upon. And one of the technical moves I wanted to bring up is how do I dream the session? And so as you may know, dreams hold a special place in the history of psychoanalysis, where Freud thought that the dream could take you into the repressed wishes of a person And he had a very methodical way of addressing a dream, which was you would take initially in the interpretation of dreams, that was written in 1900, which would take a dream, look at the elements, and say, okay, you dreamt this. What do you associate to that? Then you mentioned this element. What do you associate to that? While that is a method of dream interpretation, it does open up this idea that the dream is not elements to be decoded, like that when you see an eagle, for example, in a dream, it means power or beauty or what have you, but rather asking the individual to give us their subjective experience of it. It also, when you think about something as a dream, gives each of the elements. So a person, I was in a kitchen and I saw my brother, opens up that each of those elements could then take on different meaning than the actual concrete kitchen or brother. So one way to shift the way you're hearing material is regardless of what the person says. So they might tell you a story about driving down the road and passing a school bus. If you just insert the phrase in your own mind, not out loud, but in your own mind, that they just said, I dreamt that I was driving down the road and passed a school bus. Now, each of the elements in the dream, the driver, what were they driving, the school bus, the road, each of those elements can be expanded upon and associatively engaged with in order to try to expand the person's narrative. This can be particularly useful when you encounter people that seem to give a story that kind of recurs across time with different people representing the same characters. And so let's think about that. So this is where the narrative idea comes from. So narrative theory in that the text of a story isn't just what's written on the page of a book and it's forever that way. It's how the reader engages with the text and makes sense of the different characters. So here we have an idea of characters in a room, another way to maybe open up the possibilities of what someone could be saying from you. So we have the patient from session 7. They tell you about a difficult colleague, that they lost their father, that there was this indifferent doctor, and the brother who hung up on them. So at least three different elements that could be drawn out. So one, each of those characters definitely can be and is a person in the patient's life and can be addressed at that level. And sometimes that's necessary. Two, these could be characters in a patient's personal emotional drama. So you can see a difficult colleague, a lost father, indifferent doctor, brother, all could represent the same person from their past, and could be a way in which they are engaging with kind of a templated idea of how to approach a person in authority, father, doctor, or male, brother, colleague. And I'm assuming just for this moment, the colleague is male. Or it could be, and not or, it's always and more, but a barometer in the field of the current mental position and emotional experience. So a difficult colleague, lost father, indifferent doctor, brother. All of these could actually speaking to the patient is communicating in this moment, in the field between us. There is a feeling that the therapist doesn't care, is aloof, is indifferent, isn't listening, hung up, distant like the doctor, hard to get along with like the colleague, and absent like the lost father. And that can speak to what's happening right now in the room. And it could be a communication about that the temperature is cold and not connected, and just kind of wondering about why that may be. So we've described that you can insert the phrase, I dreamed that. We've described you can treat the characters in a room like a story and trying to give them multiple meanings. And another element that can be utilized pretty regularly, and maybe one of the, maybe kind of a linchpin really for psychodynamic work, and helping shift mental states, is the use of metaphor. And whether the patient brings up the metaphor or the therapist brings up the metaphor, metaphor is a powerful way because it is a literary device that links two elements that were not previously linked and can allow the generation of multiple different meanings and introduce new aspects into previously understood concepts, which really is a lot of what is attempting to be done in psychotherapy, opening up new vistas of understanding and ways of seeing by introducing new associative elements. So, metaphor, and this is from Wikipedia. I didn't make up this definition, but I thought it was a pretty nice one. So, the word metaphor itself is a metaphor, which is really kind of a neat way to think about it. And it comes from a Greek term meaning transference or ownership. The user of metaphor alters the reference of the word, carrying it. So, the Greek term can also mean carrying it from one semantic realm to another. And I looked up Wikipedia on June 16, 2026. And it was just the Wikipedia article for metaphor. So one thing becomes another, right? This is exactly what Freud was kind of getting at when he describes transference. The analyst becomes the father. And then later through the psychoanalytic lineage, Bion starts to wonder, well, maybe that's actually the whole crux of it. How do we help shift things from kind of this raw emotional experience? Bion would have used the word beta element. He chose that word because it was a word devoid of previous meaning, and he infused meaning into it in his lexicon. And we carry the raw emotional experience from this terror, this panic, this unease, this nausea, this overwhelm into something representable or thinkable, and it can help it be containable. So a patient may say, it's like the lights are off in the house. And, that is a way of describing something that the person was having difficulty describing before. And instead of saying, oh, lights mean this, house means that, lights represent depression, house represents isolation that you're experiencing. It's rather, you can think about it in the following way. So let's say flat patient comes back for the next session. You have engaged in some work around Alvarez and Levine. You made some it statements, some you statements. The patient feels like they've shifted during that from kind of a non-vitality into some kind of more engaging element. And they said, I had this image. Image could be dream, daydream, memory. It could even be a story of a house with the lights off and someone still inside it. And the therapist now can insert silently in their own mind, I dreamt I had this image of a house with the lights off and someone still inside it. And then inside the parentheses here are like what's internally going on in the therapist's mind. The house is a place in a dream, not a fact to be solved. A traditional interpretation may say the house is depression, isolation, patient since the mother or father's death. And while possibly accurate, it closes off possibility. It could be useful to do that if you need to help organize. Someone's overwhelmed, oftentimes kind of not shutting down in a negative sense, but shutting down in a framework sense that let's not explore right now. Let's contain, organize, list, give reason to what's happening. And that can help be kind of defining for people. And when they have something defined, they can hold on to, and that can be helpful to settle when people are feeling overwhelmed. So that's not bad. It's not a bad way to I'm trying to move away from bad and good, even in my own language, but it's not bad. It's a move that can be used. A narrative move, though, that we're kind of talking about today, the therapist, gosh, you had this image of a house with the lights off. Someone's still inside it. So you're telling me someone's in there. The lights are off. Do we know anything about them? You know, you could say this or hold it in your own mind. Maybe they're waiting for someone. Maybe they're hiding. What could be communicated and how could the story be built out to help try to give representation to some emotional experience. And these all, the use of dreaming the session, narrative, metaphor, and many other techniques, are to try to shift from pattern recognition, diagnosis, treatment planning into kind of transformation. And it's always fine to acknowledge depression, isolation, and often necessary, as I said. This second kind of move vitalizes, plays with the narrative, and allows transformative possibility that somebody could move deeper into the experience of depression, not just feeling overwhelmed in a dark house, but into the thought that, yeah, perhaps I am hiding from something. And what might it be I'm hiding from? Maybe I feel younger when I'm in the house. Maybe it's like a game of hide and seek even. Could it become that? What would you find if it was that? Are there other people in the home? Are they playing the game and it feels like you've been forgotten? But it allows a deepening of narrative meaning and an expansion of a sense of self in the mind. Okay, well, that's where we'll stop for today.